we have ever bought. Like, if I tell you about myself, the hardest thing that I ever wanted was something that was beautiful from outside, but was extremely suffocating from inside. Like, I've worn stethoscopes as a doctor, I've worn blazers as a civil servant, as an assistant commissioner, I've worn shawls, beautiful ones that were given to me or gifted to me as souvenirs when I was working as a philanthropist. All that was hard to earn. All that was very hard on me. They took a lot of efforts, but they were not the hardest thing I've ever worn. The hardest thing was a smile when I was anything but okay. Yes, it was a smile, a beautifully drawn smile, a perfectly timed smile, a delicately practiced smile that said, I am fine, even if I was not. If I now ask you another question, like let's suppose 5 minutes ago, there was a man standing at the edge of this very building, and then he fell from that cliff, started bleeding, broke his bones, and is barely conscious now. What would you do? I'm sure most of you would not even wait for the formal announcement. You would rush to take that person to the nearest emergency. But if I rather tell you that in this room, in this very room, there is a person who is combating deadly depression, would you respond with the same urgency? I'm sure you won't. Why? Because the pain of a bleeding body is visible, but the suffocation of a soul that's suffering is not. And it's human nature. We tend to take those things for granted which are not visible to our physical eye. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not saying this as a doctor or a civil servant or as a philanthropist. I'm saying this as someone very vulnerable. Someone who has cried behind the locked doors of her bathroom. Someone who has stared at the ceiling of her room night after night, asking herself, why am I feeling this when the world outside is so perfect? And I'm just saying this as a Pakistani, where log kya kahenge still weighs heavier than tumhara dil kya kehta hai. Guys, today people see me as a success story. They watch my interviews on television, young girls message me on my social media handles, Dr. Hajra, you inspire us. But if I take you back to my girlhood and tell you my story in its raw form, you'll see a totally different side of it. I still remember when my grandmother passed away, amid my board exams, I spiraled into a deep depression. When I was preparing for my MD-CAT or for my CSS, I had to face very severe panic attacks all alone. When I went to my medical school and then to the Civil Services Academy, I had to face very bad social anxiety. Similarly, when I was treating sick patients or when I was dealing with helpless people as a civil servant, I took their traumas home with me as my second skin. If I go deeper into my memory, I can tell you some specific horrific incidences from my life. Believe me, when it was the first day of my hostel life in my medical school, I was brutally ragged. And I didn't sleep that night. My throat, it got choked with tears that night. I'm still traumatized to this day because of that. Similarly, when I was preparing for CSS with my house job, my senior doctors, they used to throw very bitter taunts on me. They didn't realize that I was preparing for the toughest exam of this country with a job that took me 30 to 48 hours of duty consecutively. So this is how brutal we are as a society. We aren't kind to each other. And you know what? That pain, that suffering, it wasn't what hurt me the most. What hurt me the most was the silence that was forced upon me. Why? Because my parents, they were very friendly, but I couldn't open up to them. And thus, managing therapy for myself through my own pocket money wasn't possible for me. So affordability was my first issue. Secondly, it wasn't easy for me to go to therapy sessions every now and then from my hostel. So accessibility was my second issue. And thirdly, I only had one option left, the psychiatry department of my own hospital. Why didn't I go there? Because I didn't want my identity to be disclosed to the psychiatrists in my hospital. So anonymity was my third concern. And that's how Anon Association came into being. It's an organization that offers affordable, accessible, and anonymous mental health, the things that I once needed myself the most. When I was creating this organization, Anon Association, people used to ask me, why are you investing your energies into something that's not even a priority in this country? And I told them, that's exactly why I'm creating this. Because 50 million people in my country are suffering in silence just because it's not even a priority in this country. When I created this organization, we didn't have any huge budget or fancy office or a lot of permanent employees. We just have some WhatsApp groups, some online forms, some volunteers, and above all, hope. And believe me, sometimes hope is all it takes to pull someone back from the edge. Ladies and gentlemen, I often wonder, if we do not ask diabetic patients to snap it off, or people with broken legs to walk it away, then why do we ask people with mental health issues to behave in a certain way? We do need gratitude. Gratitude is beautiful, but so is serotonin. We do need prayers, but we also need professionals. We do need faith, but we also need first aid. We do need duas, but we also need right diagnosis. So ladies and gentlemen, let's move forward. I won't stop here, and I didn't stop there when I was combating mental illnesses. I realized something bigger. I felt that mental health is not only about pulling you down. It's something that can create invisible shackles that can also hold you back. I realized this when I was teaching CSS aspirants. They were brilliant minds, but failing again and again. Why? Because they lacked self-confidence. And I realized this when I was interacting with the underprivileged communities of Lahore as a civil servant. The youth, it had a lot of potential, a lot of talent, but it was stuck in a cycle of self-doubt. Why? Because it was constantly being reminded, tumse nahi ho paega. So I realized that I do not only need to work on mental illnesses, but also on the mental barriers that were preventing people from achieving what they could achieve. And that's when I started this project named 12 Gates, 12 Businesses in the Walled City of Lahore. This project was about upskilling people, reviving traditional skills, and empowering small businesses, especially women-led ones, and providing them global platform to showcase their products. And this project was praised by Mr. Kamran Lashari himself, and it won the Best Community Project Award in the Civil Services Academy. So this made me realize that we Pakistanis, we are not survivors. No, we are not. Jugadi keh dete hain hame, but we are not survivors. We are warriors. And that's why we are vulnerable. Vulnerability is a sign of strength, of being a warrior. And we need to accept it this way. We need to embrace it this way. We need to be less judgmental towards each other, and we need to be more open towards each other. So, in this world where everybody is pulling the legs of other people, we need to be that someone whose little push can project the people around us in the highest of the skies. Let's pledge today that we'll create a society. Together we'll create that society where no one has to wear a fake smile or a stethoscope or a blazer or a shawl to feel accomplished, where we would proudly wear mental peace on our faces, and that would be the indicator of our accomplishment. Let's make that Pakistan together. I'm ending with this quote. Thank you.